But here we have a continuation of what we began yesterday. And what we began yesterday, that the Rebbe was commenting on a very unusual historical event that happened when the Rebbe was speaking. Just before the Rebbe was speaking, what was it? That the nations of the world met, especially America and Russia. This is 1991, and they met together to discuss world peace. And they said they were made agreements that they weren't going to increase armament and developing weapons of war. Instead, they were going to divert that money to progress and to feeding the poor and developing the poor so that they could be self-sustenant and etc., self-sustaining and etc. So there was an amazing unification, an amazing sign of unity and hope for peace. And it was unity and hope that was actually manifest. It was actually real. It wasn't just talking up in the air. They actually did it. And for a while, it really worked out well. The reasons why the world is in the state of confusion that it is now is that's not our place to determine here, but we're just that we can know that it is possible that there can be world peace. And in fact, there was, and the foundations that were there were already laid. And not only that, that's the natural state of man. The natural state of man is not war and destruction and kill. The natural state of man is that everyone is supposed to appreciate the God's creations. And one of God's creations is, first of all, to appreciate the fact that we're God's creations, and also to appreciate all the other creations of God. And one of the main features of the creations of God is that everything is different. Every creation is different, if for no other reason than they're in different places, right? Every bug is in a different place. Every germ, every atom is a different place. And they're all harmony, they're all working together for the unity of the whole world. So this idea of unity and harmony is a natural state, right? And in a person's body, when the heart and the lungs are doing their job, then that's good. Then a person can function. The same thing is with also, how do you say, ethics and values. When people do according to what God wants, so the world is a good world. So that was only a sign of it. And says the Rebbe even more, we can see that this is connected to the work of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. What's got to do with Gorbachev and Reagan got to do with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. First of all, we can see that this meeting happened in New York. And it happened right near the place where the Lubavitcher Rebbe set up his headquarters in New York. And also, these are the two countries that Chabad was really active in. Russia, they were there for like 200 and whatever, 20 years, 50 years. And in America, now they're in America, and those two countries made peace between them. Okay. Even more, we can see that we're seeing that this idea of making peace in the world, even though that it is a natural state and it's a healthy state and it's waiting for it to be done, but still it won't be done unless the Moshiach has something to do with it. And that's why this whole meeting was done in New York, especially. That's the place where the previous Rebbe, who he's the Moshiach, lived, and the Rebbe also. The Rebbe is the continuation of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he's the Moshiach of our generation, and peace actually began. At least it was shown that it's possible to make peace. Order also, and this is the main thing, mitzad kesher, because of the connection between. 1 minute. Of the time, this time to the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And again, I showed you pictures last time of who the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was the Yoso Erev Shabbat. This is the last Shabbat in the month of Shvat. This month, like next Shabbat, is we call it the last Shabbat of every month, blesses the month after. Chodesh Achar Asar. This is the 11th month of the 12 months of the Jewish year, Shvat. V'hasirisha, the 10th day of this 10th month. This is the day that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away. The 10th day of the 11th month. 11th month is Shvat. And the 10th day was when the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away in 1950. Shal Kavod Kedushas Admor Nasi Derenu. This is the passing away of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Be'echad Asar, and the 11th day of that year, 1950, the 11th day of Shvat, Nasa Hemshech was a continuation. The Rebbe is not talking about himself. He became the continuation with more power and even more energy to finish the work that the previous Rebbe started in our generation. Because our generation, says the Rebbe, is the last generation, Dor Acharon Shel Galut. Our generation is the last one of exile, Shu Dor Rishon, and the first generation of redemption, the first generation of Moshiach, health, harmony, progress, blessing. That's it. Geula, being redeemed, coming out of all of our troubles. In the course of the 42 years from when the previous Rebbe passed away, the previous Rebbe passed away in 1950, and now the Rebbe is speaking 42 years afterwards. This is 1992, right? In the beginning of 1992, in the course of those 42 years, we can say that they correspond to the 42 journeys, Sheba Midbar in the desert, Amim, that was called Midbar Amim, into the world desert that the Jewish people took from Egypt to Israel. Sha'az then, Kavar Muchanim, after these 42 journeys, the Jewish people were ready to go into the land of Israel, and now we are also ready. These 42 years correspond to the 42 journeys. Back then, they were ready to go into Israel, and we are also ready to go in the complete, total redemption into Israel. And that's one of the jobs of Moshiach, and only Moshiach is going to do it, to draw all the Jews to Israel, just like Moses did. We can move on, unlike Moses didn't go into the land of Israel, but Moshiach will. Like we spoke in the previous Farbringen, that also the time, in addition to the place was in New York, also the time was announced, that they announced, the nations of the world, they announced, and they made this like sort of the theme of the whole meeting, this peace meeting, was a sentence from Isaiah, and they will, how do they translate it? They will beat their swords into plows. Plowshares, Umudgeshet, this is connection, it stresses the connection of the work of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he's the Moshiach of our generation, that by means of him was accomplished this thing of beating weapons of war into weapons of peace and prosperity. The Ishlach is that we can also attach this to the Torah portion. The Torah portion we're learning this week is Mishpatim. Like it says, Elu Mishpatim asher tasim lifneim, these are the laws that you should put before them. And Rashi explains, Ve'elu, it starts off, Ve'elu, and these are the laws you should put before them. When it says Ve'elu and these, it means it's a continuation of what was said before. What was said before. This is the beginning of this Torah portion. The first word in this week's Torah reading is Ve'elu. This is continuing to what we said before. What did we say before? The 10 Commandments. Just like the first 10 Commandments, everybody knows was coming from Mount Sinai. Af Elu, also these very, very mundane monetary laws also come from Mount Sinai. And that's what it means. You should put Elu, Ve'elu, and these laws, these monetary laws, you should put Lifneihem, you should put before them. If you have a court case, take it in front of them, in front of Jewish judges, and not in front of non-Jewish judges. Even though the non-Jewish judges might be better judges, and they might be more intelligent, and they may be more accurate, and they judge exactly according to the Torah. Doesn't make any difference. Just like when you put on tefillin, you're supposed to put on tefillin on the opposite arm from that one which you write with, right? If you write with your right hand, so you put tefillin on your left hand, not because one arm is better than the other. That's just the law. That's what God decided. The same thing here, God decided, don't take laws from the Torah for non-Jews to decide. Afilu yadata bedin, even if you know that this law, that the non-Jewish judges, that they know the laws according to the Torah, nevertheless don't go to their courts. A logical reason behind this is because non-Jews will always go according to their intellect, their logic. And a Jewish court, it could be that logically they should say one thing, but the Torah says to do something else, and therefore they'll go against their logic, that's a Jewish judge. Because the Torah is not based on logic, the Torah is based on God. And the fact that God says laws doesn't mean that God suddenly decided to limit himself to be logical. No, God decided to reveal his infinity in logic. So the logical laws of the Torah are really, even though they seem to be very logical, and you're supposed to use your mind to understand them, but the fact of the matter is that they're purely God. And that if it was a contradiction against what you understand and what is written in the Torah, even though you might be able to twist the words or something like that, but don't. It says a non-Jew is more apt, is less likely to surrender his logic to the Torah than a Jewish rabbi, the Jewish judges. So it says, talking of the whole idea, the main topic of this Torah portion, which is called Mishpatim, is, like I said, dinim, laws between man and his fellow man. And these are laws which are found in almost every culture, community, nation, race, whatever in the world. They have laws. Dvar Malchut, the things which are, so these laws which are said in the Torah, the mishpat, understandable monetary laws, she'ilu lo nemra, that if it wasn't said in the Torah, we would be forced to say them. Maybe not exactly as they are, but we would force to deal with laws of propriety and selling, and two people come in and say that car belongs to me, and the other one says it belongs to me. What are you supposed to do? Well, what are you supposed to do? So the Torah tells us what we're supposed to do in such cases. So a person is going to say, well, I mean, what's the big thing about the Torah? In every place in the world, they have courts that tell you what to do. You know, you don't need the Torah for that, right? It says, no, you do need the Torah. Why? It says if the Torah wasn't given, that you could learn modesty from a cat. Cats, they go to the bathroom, I guess they cover it over. And ants, when ants take sugar from a house or something, no ant steals sugar from the other one. Each one goes. So you can learn, these are logical laws that humanity is based on. There's a whole, how do you say it? I don't know if it's called a philosophy. There's a whole books of jurisprudence. Where did laws come from? You know, if laws just came in order to society, just to, from necessity society, or maybe it come from some divine source or some spiritual source or whatever. Question. So we're saying no, that all ideas of right and wrong, they basically, all of them come because God implanted that inside of our minds. And nevertheless, we do not go according to only our feelings. We go according to what it says in the Torah. And even though we could learn the laws from our own feelings, and even more, shechayuvim movement, that you could understand why a person, let's say, that kills somebody else, why he should be guilty, not only in intellect, in intelligent person, but also in non-Jews also understand. You have to have laws. You can't just kill anybody. You can't steal somebody's house. There won't be any society. So you can understand that. And that a lot of times the non-Jews, they judge according to the laws of Israel. Nevertheless, yesh lomar loche, and we can say, therefore, it says in the beginning of our parsha, Elu Mishpatim, these are the laws. What does it mean? And if this is adding on to the laws of Mount Sinai, we're saying even though these monetary laws and laws of damages and etc., these are very legal, cold, intellectual laws, they really came from Mount Sinai. Shegama Mishpatim, that even the legal statutes, logical statutes, shechayavim muvan b'seichel, that normal human intelligence demands that you make such laws. Nevertheless, you have to do that not because they're logical, not because we're nice people and we're kind people, and not because the Jews are very smart and because we're eternal, because we are God's people, etc. No, we do this because these are God Himself gave these laws. Not because the intellect, but because this is what God commanded. Just God wants that we should try to understand as much as possible. That's also a commandment, to understand. So we must try to understand, but we must also always keep in mind that the basis of Torah is not logic. In fact, the basis of logic itself is not logic. Where does logic come from? Where does intellect come from? Where does right and wrong come from? So you can say, well, it comes from my mind. Where does your mind come from? My mind just, comes from my mind. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, say something clear. My mind comes from my mind. That's pretty clear. It's clear, but it doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, well, where do you think it comes from? It comes from God. That makes less sense. You ever see God around? So it ends up that you have a choice, a free choice, two things that don't make any sense. Either you can say, I go according to my logic because that's what I feel, or you can say, I'm going to go according to God, I'm going according to God's logic because that's what God feels. And our Torah, Judaism, says that we must do things because that's what God feels, even though sometimes, not always, it contradicts what we feel. The whole point of this mishpatim, these normal logical laws, is that we do it because Tzivu Hashem, God commanded. But God just wants it. We should try to understand as much as possible. Therefore, it says tasim, you have to put in front of them, only in front of Jewish judges, because the Jewish judges are more apt to also judge not only according to their intellect, and it's sometimes opposite of their intellect. And they just bring a source of what it says in the Torah, and this is what you have to do. Because they do according to the legal law. Therefore, and it shouldn't not be that way. Torah law should be according to because God said it. Okay, what's it got to do with world peace? We're going to see. Even a deeper says, Elo Mishpatim, these are the laws. Elo Mishpatim, these are the laws. Also, these laws come from Mount Sinai. These legal laws, we can say it means like this. The reason why your mind your intellect should agree with these Torah laws is because of Sinai. What does it mean because of Sinai? Not only with the laws, if these laws were not given on Mount Sinai, then it could be that your logic would not obligate them. Kamor Rishonim, like it was in the beginning. The logic is that intellect, is a commandment from that, is a result from that. These commandments is the commandments of the Torah. Now, let's put it this way: one of the biggest commandment, perhaps of all of them, is learning Torah. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. If you've ever been into a shiva and saw boys sitting learning the Torah, they're learning the words most of the time from the Talmud. The Talmud are these amazingly holy rabbis that most of them had the power to raise the dead. And they're discussing the most seemingly meaningless things, that you could possibly imagine. What happens if you find something and it's on the line between your land and somebody else's land, but you have one witness and he has a deed. He has a deed to this thing. Which do you go according to? And the rabbis, these great rabbis, are arguing pages and pages about arguments about what? It says because the fact of the matter is that God wants his understanding to be in our understanding. That's what it means. Sinai. What happened to Mount Sinai? God himself, the creator of the universe, came and spoke to an entire nation. Now, there's these religions, these Eastern religions, they also believe in God to a certain degree. I mean, whatever they are, they believe in some God. But that God would come down and talk to everyone, a whole nation, and he would tell them laws about what happens if you lose something, what happens if you have an argument about money. There is no way in any other religion in the world who wants to worship a God like that. A God that he cares about what happens to your nickel. You lose a nickel, somebody else finds it, and you say it's mine. He says it's not, it's mine. You have to shine a show. Where does God fit into that? He says that's Judaism. Judaism wants you to know that God decides things, and he wants you to understand it as much as you can. That's the idea of the Talmud. You should sit and use your mind to try to understand these godly ideas, even though you know they come from God, and basically you can't understand them. But that brings God into your understanding. That the basis of understanding is ultimate truth. Because this comes from God's wisdom. Kavan, since the Torah is difteros, but because the Torah is like the blueprints and the, how do you say, the original documents, shebehem, that the world was created from, as Naseh Devarim Elu, so these things become obligations in the world, right? God himself, creator of the angels and the universes and everything like that, he actually spoke words on Mount Sinai, and everyone heard these words. So therefore, our intellect has to be used to try to understand the infinite. And if we don't understand it, that's our problem. That's not the problem of the truth. Shedato noteh, that our minds should incline to things that we agree with God. That's the point. We agree with God. You could say, listen, God says this, but I don't agree with him, right? That's not a Jewish attitude. You say, God says this, I don't agree with him, but who am I? I'm just a creation. So therefore I agree. But the essence, you don't agree. You don't agree with what God said. There's a famous argument, this is what in Baba Metzia, that the rabbis argued against Rabbi Eliezer. And the whole thing, Rabbi Eliezer said a certain law, and the rabbi said, you're wrong. And he said, let this tree outside prove. And the tree jumped out of the ground. It jumped out of the ground. They said, trees don't prove. And he said, well, let the river, a flowing river, let it flow backwards. You'll show that I'm right. And the river flowed backwards. The rivers don't prove anything. Rivers don't prove anything. Right? In other words, you have to go according to the logic of God. Even if the world shows us the signs, it goes on. It's a very, very strange story. But according to this, we can also say that what it means, Elu Amishpatim, it says Ve'elu. This adds on to the first. Just like the first laws, the 10 commandments from Mount Sinai, he is Bekach Shamishpatim Shenitnu B'Sinai, the laws that were given on Mount Sinai, they're drawn down into human understanding. We have to try to understand. It's a commandment. Even though basically we're dealing with God here, but we come to understand, we put infinite understanding into our heads. That's the whole novelty of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Shabbat, there was negated, there was removed the barrier which divided between the upper worlds and the lower worlds. That the wisdom of God, the upper worlds, after Sinai, could be drawn down into human understanding. Shagam dato, that also a person's mind should be inclined to this. That we should actually understand ideas of God. But nevertheless, together with this, a person has to understand that it's God's will. It's not because we understand it. And it could be that even if we don't understand it, but nevertheless, that's the law. The Indian Zeh, this has to be also by the non-Jews, doing the 7 Noahide commandments. That even though that their intellect says that this should be the law, but nevertheless, they have to accept these laws because it says in the Torah. That's what it says in the. But if they do it because just they understand, so it says it's not one of the Chasid, they're not actually what calls the Chasidi Olam, almost Olam, and they're not even wise. In other words, if the non-Jews, they come to their own conclusion and laws because they are very smart and they're very, very intelligent, very insightful people. But for instance, in Germany before World War II, they had these great philosophers, Kant and all these people, Spiegel and Hegel and all these guys, genius philosophers. And they came to also with ethics, with what is right and what is wrong, and what is the categorical imperative or something like that. All these wonderful, amazing, deep, tremendous ideas that they had. But nevertheless, we can't go according to the laws because our mind says, even as the biggest genius, because you see what came out of it. You can see what the terrible tragedies, the travesties that they did. They killed 27 million Russians for absolutely no reason, just went and just killed them. But Tachlis Shlemus is going to be in the days of the Moshiach. In the days of the Moshiach, it says the whole world will only be interested to know what God wants and what is God's mind. Shenemar, like it says, the whole world will be filled with a connection, awareness of God. Hainu, Shedat at Hashem, that people only want to know God. They'll know the Meiser Merkava, all the upper chariots, all the different secrets, and etc. etc. When we can see this is also hinted at the end of our Torah portion. At the end of this week's Torah portion, there's a very weird story. And it talks about something in the end of our Torah portion that happened right before the Torah was given. Because there's no necessarily order in the Torah, a chronological order. So it says over there that that they saw, the elders of Israel, they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet was like, I guess, white sapphire. And they gazed at God and they ate and they drank. That's what it says. Look at the end of this week's Torah portion. It says they saw God at Mount Sinai. It was actually drawn down into their mind and united with them just like food. They ate and they drank. It became, the oneness of God became like blood and flesh, just like their flesh. By means of learning the inside of the Torah, the soul of the Torah, in a way that they could understand it. That's the idea of Hasidut. That by means of this, it says Beshivim Lashon, the Torah Hasidut was even translated into 70 languages by the previous Rebbe. I don't know if it was actually 70, but the languages of the world. Says that's hinted at the word Livnat Sapir, white sapphire. Livnat, or maybe Livnat means, okay, this is Shenasim, it's Livnat Sapir. The word Livnat also means bricks. Sapphire bricks. So it says, Levanim, bricks, are made by man, not like stones. This hints at the letters of the 70 languages of the non-Jews. It says that Hebrew is like stones because those are letters from God, Hebrew. And in order that this should be understood to people, to people that don't understand now Hebrew, so therefore it was translated into all these different languages. So that's what means the Torah, which is pure godliness put into this world, is you think pure godliness you can't understand. He says, no, God wants you to try to understand it also. And not only just to try to understand it, but even non-Jews should try to understand it, even in their language. The Adshia movement to it should be understood even to the non-Jews. Also, they are obligated to believe in God. They have to believe in God. So one way of them to believing in God is learning Hasidut, that this is a preparation for what it says, then I will transform all the nations in the world to have a clear language to call God in one big group. Okay, so what have we learned over here? What did we learn over here? When God gave the Torah into the world, it's pure godliness, but he wants us to try to understand it because God wants the world to be permeated with godliness. So taking these godly ideas into our mind, it helps us understand, to connect with God, even though these ideas don't seem to be godly at all. They're talking about the most mundane things, like in this week's Torah portion. So that's why the Torah portion starts off with ve'ela. And these legal monetary laws have the same exact potency and godliness as the 10 commandments that were on Mount Sinai. But these I want to be put into the world so that they'll transform the world, even the non-Jews of the world, so that their lives will go according to the Torah, God's will. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.